Greetings, system failure listeners. Nate here with your weekly essay read. This one entitled The Great Iceberg Roll and subtitled On the Grand Trajectory of Human History. Key takeaways. Number 1. Over the course of human history, top-down decision-making structures have gradually been inverted into bottom-up structures. Number 2. This proliferation of democracy has had the effect of subjugating individual egos and creating a proto-superorganism. Number 3. The next logical step in this transformation is the conquest by democracy of the workplace, the last bastion of top-down decision-making. The Great Iceberg Roll. Because it's exposed to the blazing sun, the top of an iceberg melts much faster than the bottom, which is submerged in frigid seawater. This causes icebergs' various faces to melt at substantially different rates, dramatically altering their geometry during the melting process. When their centers of gravity reach tipping points, icebergs can be observed spontaneously rolling over in the open ocean, exposing their underbellies to the sun. Human history has been undergoing an analogous inversion. In the aftermath of the agricultural revolution, human society was organized into rigid top-down structures. God kings, whose least word was law, sat atop those early political hierarchies. Whole civilizations existed almost exclusively to glorify the egos of these rulers. But human society has been slowly changing since then. Much like an iceberg rolling over, we've gradually replaced top-down decision-making structures with bottom-up management strategies. Classical Greece and Rome were the first societies to extol the virtues of democracy. In practice, however, they excluded huge swaths of their populations, such as their slaves. Those slave economies eventually gave way to the feudal societies of the Middle Ages. Being a peasant was a considerable improvement over being a slave, but it was still an exploitative economic arrangement. Feudal lords owned all the land and demanded a substantial percentage of its produce from anyone who worked on it. In 1215, English nobles forced a begrudging King John to sign the Magna Carta. That landmark document ceded some of the monarch's power to lesser nobles. Its signing marked the beginning of the long road from feudalism to modern capitalism. That road culminated in the American and French revolutions of the late 1700s and the replacement of monarchies with representative governments designed to reflect the will of the people. At this point in human history, most people have come to expect representation in the decision-making processes that govern their societies. As in classical Greece and Rome, reality still falls short of the democratic ideal. Our iceberg has not yet completed its role. But the historical pattern is clear. Bottom-up decision-making is slowly but surely being is slowly but surely replacing the top-down management systems of yesteryear. Superorganism. The term superorganism refers to a collection of individuals who, in evolutionary terms, function as a cohesive unit. Ants, bees, and termites, for example, compete over scarce resources as colonies, not as individuals. Superorganisms evolve out of individual organisms who bind their Darwinian fates together by acting as collectives. The evolutionary theory of endosymbiosis is a classic example. According to that theory, a large single-celled organism once swallowed a smaller bacterium, but did not digest it, somewhere far back in the mists of evolutionary time. Instead of being consumed, the swallowed bacterium gradually evolved into mitochondria, the power plant of the cell. Mitochondria may have once been separate organisms, but the great armies of white blood cells that patrol our bloodstreams are still individual organisms and, simultaneously, integral parts of all of our bodies. That makes us, to some degree, superorganisms ourselves. The existence of superorganisms vividly illustrates how the concept of the individual is an abstraction or a conceptual overlay. Even though our physical bodies are composed of myriad life forms, we regard each other as if we're individuals. It's a useful fiction. The mental conception of self, or the ego, is not a concrete reality. It's an economic convention for resource management that can be transcended. Democracy at work. The idea of democracy is encapsulated in the old Latin motto, Vox Populi, Vox Dei, which means voice of the people, voice of God. It means that many hands on the steering wheel of a metaphorical ship of state yields superior outcomes than any one person doing all the steering themselves. In other words, the will of God is supposed to make itself known by averaging together as many minds as possible in the decision-making process. Since no one person gets to have everything their own way, having many hands on the ship's wheel is also a bulwark against economic exploitation. Accordingly, as our iceberg slowly rolls over, human society has become gradually less exploitative. Economic relations between the upper and lower classes have become far more equitable than they ever were under Bronze Age god kings, and a good deal less exploitative than they were during the feudalism of the Middle Ages. Modern democracy remains a far cry from the ideal of Vox Populi, Vox Dei. But extrapolating this historical trend into the future suggests that human society will continue getting more equitable over time. In an obvious way for our iceberg to continue its role is the imposition of democracy in the workplace. The specific nature of U.S. history causes Americans to profess an allergy to taxation without representation. Most citizens of modern industrial democracies would agree with the sentiment. But paradoxically, the same citizens remain oddly tolerant of autocratic, top-down decision-making structures at their workplaces. Changing the capitalist ownership structure of business is a silver bullet that promises to alleviate our most chronic economic problems. The offshoring of our manufacturing capacity, for example, is a symptom of private ownership. The workers in a democratically run factory would never vote to fire themselves and move their businesses overseas in a bid to boost profits. Pollution of the environment and the underpayment of desperate workers are two other profitable strategies that collective decision-making would curtail. For collective business owners, profits are broadly distributed and only one variable among many to be carefully managed. But for private business owners, concentrated profit is the overarching raison d'être. The world's biggest companies are run by shareholders who are totally divorced from the production process. Their involvement is limited to dispatching proxies to board meetings with instructions to extract the maximum possible return on investment. Conclusion. To view history through the lens of democracy is to see the grand trajectory of the human story as an ascension out of the prison of ego and into a superorganism with the voice of God. That voice is hidden from our individual minds, just as our minds are hidden from the individual white blood cells patrolling our bodies. Nonetheless, like white blood cells, we're part of a larger whole. The transition from top-down egoic decision-making to bottom-up democracy is part of a historical quest to graduate from the glorification of individual egos. Human destiny, therefore, lies in the transcendence of the illusion of self. Alrighty, folks, well, that's it for this week's audio essay. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, consider visiting us over at systemfailure.org. There you can enter in your email address to receive the text version of this and all future all future essays right there in your email inbox every single Sunday morning. Additionally, if you'd like to get in touch with either Brian or myself, you can accomplish that tidy feat over on the About page simply by clicking on the appropriate name. And with that, I'm off, but I will be back on Monday with a regularly scheduled edition of the System Failure Podcast with Brian. Definitely looking forward to that. In the meantime, I hope you are all having a fantastic week.